Okay, so next up we have No Doherty. This is Niall O'Doherty, who's working at Pixelate for 5 years now. He's actually been following me around. I've worked with him in my last 3 jobs, so someone later can tell him in words that I can't and just go away. No, we love him. He's going to be talking about caching in Preside, which is a super useful topic, so hopefully this will be awesome. I'm sure it will. I've seen the slides.
Thank you, Dom. Hi. So, yeah, as you can see from the title, it's Caching in Preside, a Whirlwind Tour. So, let's get started. So, about me. So, I'm the Technical Services Director at Pixelate Group. And some personal details about me. So, I live in Donegal, Ireland. I'm a software developer and I have been for a very long time, so I'm not like the other guys. I'm not going to disclose how long, but it's been just as long, to be fair. And I love everything about software development, flying, not just with Preside, but in airplanes, and STEM technologies as well. So science, technology, engineering, mathematics. What I'm not so impressed about is that 4/5 of the Spice Girls have decided to make a comeback tour, so yeah. So. And if you want to contact me, then yep, I am contactable on LinkedIn here and on Twitter at NODoherty. So let's do a little audience audit. So everyone here know what caching is? Anyone not know what caching is? No? See some Preside guys at the back. Okay then, good. That's a good start. So do you know why we should use cache? Yeah, we all know why we should cache, yeah?
Performance.
Good man, yeah, okay. One of the key words, yeah. There's no prizes, by the way, for any of these answers, so, you know, or punishment, so don't be afraid to put up your hand. So do you know how to use cache in Preside apps? Has anybody been playing around with Preside and know how to apply cache technology? Steve, good man. Another Preside candidate, good man. Is anyone familiar with the ColdBox platform? Okay, good. And is anyone familiar with CacheBox, the CacheBox framework? Yeah. Okay then, so these are all kind of things that are going to come up in this talk. So is anyone currently using caching techniques in their applications? Okay, good, okay then. Right, okay, so hopefully you'll find this useful. Okay then, so just for your information, this talk does not cover any of the CFML engine sort of caching methods and functions, you know, cache within and queries and CF cache and things like that. This is purely around Preside and the ColdBox platform and CacheBox framework. Cool. So, slight lag in this. So what is cache? So, a bit of basics. So, application generated content and data that's retrieved from disk, stored in application memory for a defined time period, and the application refers to this content/data in memory rather than disk. Okay, so that's cache, and then a little diagram, disk and memory. Okay, just for those that like to see diagrams. Why use caching? So thank you, Mihi. Performance. So it improves application performance because the application is not having to go to disk every time, and it's slower. You know, those operations are much slower. They can go straight to memory. It reduces database operations. It reduces other persistent technology operations, API calls and such. And it also uses less network round trips to get your data. So overall, much quicker.
Uses less energy as well, which is better for the planet.
Good point. Okay. Yep. Thank you. So cache framework. So the benefit of using Preside is that there's no installation required. The Preside framework, or Preside platform, sorry, uses ColdBox platform, which comes bundled with the CacheBox framework. So all you have to do is really configure the CacheBox framework to set up whatever caches you need for your application. So you do that using the cachebox.cfc. Which has a single method named configure. Okay, so basically, as long as that CacheBox CFC is available within your application, then you can then specify individual sort of per application caches in this cachebox.cfc. The Preside platform comes with a cachebox.cfc, and it uses its own caching within the system, which I'll talk about later in the talk. So, the default Preside, the default Preside cache configuration is here, but your application configuration can then also override that or extend that within your own applications. So here's a typical cache configuration. I think that screen's cutting off, that bar's cutting off the bottom of the screen. But yeah, so in here you see the, this is a CFC, this is the cachebox.cfc, and it extends the Preside system config cachebox. Let's see, it's got a pointer or something somewhere. Yeah, so this extends the Preside system config cachebox.cfc, which is the default one, comes with Preside. And in here what we're doing is we're specifying a configure method, which will get invoked automatically by the framework. And then what we importantly need to do is ensure that super.configure is also called within this extended, this class, which is extending this base class. Okay. And here we've got two different options. So one option is what we're doing is overriding completely the default query cache, which has certain properties which I'll go through shortly as well. Or you can individually overwrite individual properties. So for example, if I want to up the max objects that the cache is configured to contain, then I can just say, okay, for performance benefits, I need to store more of this type of object in the query cache. So if we have a lot of queries using the cache, then we can increase this number here. I'll also talk about the object store, the difference between concurrent soft reference and concurrent store. But this is a typical example of configuration file, and as you can see, it's quite easy, it's quite neat. So some useful definitions and terms. So when an element is requested from the cache and it's found, it's called a hit. If we try and request an element from cache and it's not found, it's a miss. An eviction is when the cache gets too full and has to expire some items in the cache to allow for more room to add new items to the cache. How the cache works out what to evict, it uses an eviction policy. So it's an algorithm that decides what elements to be evicted from the cache, and it's based on certain algorithms. So first, anybody here, first in, first out? No? Yeah? Okay. So LFU, so discards the least frequently used items in the cache. So if you've got items in your cache and it's not really being requested that often, then that's a candidate for being evicted. Or you can go for an LRU policy, which discards least recently used items. So anything that's been used more recently gets, stays in the cache, and the least recently used items get evicted first. Reap is the kind of operation which basically removes any expired items. So whenever the cache is reaped, this is what takes the items out of cache. And you also have like eternal objects, so objects that never get purged from cache or evicted. So if you've got things that like per application, fixed set of data like enums and things like that maybe are in cache that don't need to be reaped, then they just live forever in the application. Okay. There are other terms and definitions, and there's some resources at the end of the presentation that will allow you to delve further into this. So that this is some of the more recent ones. So types of different caching. So query data caching. So by default, Preside's select data method caches your results. Okay. So anytime you call select data, your results are cached automatically in the default query cache. You can configure this. You can say, well, actually, I'm not happy about that. I want to control, what gets cached in the default query cache. So in the config.cfc in your Preside application, which lives next to your cachebox.cfc, you can set this to be true or false. So the Preside application uses a custom provider called default query cache, which is also defined in your cachebox.cfc. And you've seen in the example earlier, in the other slide with the configuration, the default query cache provider being defined. And the select data uses the cache API So this is the query data caching. So this is like a facade for the cache API for getting and setting items to and from the cache. So this is cache loading. So there's more on this later. Selects can then bypass cache as well individually. So if you've got like the default query cache set to true, and you wish to, for example, you want to ensure that you're always getting the most recent set of data from the database for a particular select, you can simply pass use cache equals false, and the select data function will then go straight to the database and ignore your cache. As of 10.9, you can also set the default behavior per request. So if a particular request needs to bypass any caching as well and always ensure it's getting the most recent data. So if you've got to feed a stream of data coming from somewhere that's partly cached, then you can also set this per request. So view caching. So ColdBox provides a render view method as part of its platform, and it allows for passing cache related parameters like cache timeout, cache last access timeout, suffix provider. But the important thing to note here is that all you have to do in order to enable cache or to have something persisted in your cache is to set cache equal to true. The others will default. There's defaults set in ColdBox that will automatically then get applied, and you can look at those default settings in the framework itself. So here's some examples. So in a view template, you can say render view equals general top nav. Okay, so this is non-cached. This is just straight up like get the view, and and every time this request and this code is compiled and run, this generates that same code over and over again. Okay, and then below here we have a cache version which basically says get me the top nav, but look, get it from cache. Try from cache first, and then just basically expire it every 20 minutes. And sometimes, believe it or not, that can make a massive difference to even some of your web applications. You can also do this in a handler. For example, if you've got a handler like a viewlet that's rendering or running some additional logic and then passing that to your view, you can also then specify these arguments in the handler as well. So cache true, cache timeout, and cache suffix. So yeah, I want to just basically make sure that this suffix, which is the key that will be used to persist the content in cache, I want to make sure this is unique, so I just hash a value list of the arguments that are getting passed to this view. Event caching. So again, enabled in Preside by default, and it caches the entire event. So, and it's simply, all you have to do that to enable this is to set cache equals true in your handler method, and that's it. Your entire event, any data calls, any views that are rendered will all get cached. So as of 10.10, the render viewlet method allows you to specify the same caching arguments as the ColdBox render view method. And the only difference between the two is that render view simply includes a view template, whereas the render viewlet allows you to run an event that then returns a rendered view. So this is an example here of setting the event cache to be true. So that's it. Just include this. So accessing CacheBox. So throughout your application, you may wish to invoke and manage your own set of cache. Okay, so in your handlers, you can simply inject the CacheBox default query cache or whatever the provider may be. So if it's a query related cache object, then you can use this one. If it's a template cache, or you can write your own. Yep, you can actually write your own provider that implements whatever persistent layer underneath that gets and sets its data from. But yeah, very, very easily, as long as it extends the iCache object interface, I think it is. I'll see if I've got this in the slides. So then injecting CacheBox into services, again, just a simple Wirebox. Is anybody familiar with Wirebox? Yeah, okay. So yeah, so Dom, you're not sure? Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's
yeah. It's the wrong sin. I think it's I think it's handlers and services are the other way around, but yeah, thanks. I did have that right way around, and I changed it just before it came up. I was like, it didn't look right. Okay, so but yeah, that's ways of injecting CacheBox and accessing the the methods in the cache framework in your handlers and services. So cache loading API. So as I mentioned, Core Coldbox has the render view method that you can just specify cache equals true, and it'll take care of any caching, cache loading, which is probably the most popular or most used, commonly used. But if you, for example, wanted to take control of that and cache your own set of data or content, then this is simply how you would go about it. So inject the query provider or the cache provider that you wish to use. Then you would basically generate a generate a cache key or unique key that you would use to refer to that content in your cache. Then you can also then check, right, try and get it from the cache. If this is null, so if it returns no data, if it's nothing is persistent in cache for this key, then you can go ahead and get whatever data from the database, whatever it is you need to do, and then set it in the cache. Okay, and that's it. Okay. So full page caching. So as of 10.9, there's been a really great feature implemented in Preside itself, which basically takes care of basically everything in your page, your page request. So you can enable this, and everything that gets rendered in that request will just will be added to cache. And there's some, there's some points to note on that. So by default, it's disabled, so we won't automatically just start caching all your stuff. You need to enable this. So you just enable it again in your config.cfc. And the setting is features.fullpagecaching.enabled equals true. And as I say, full page caching typically caches everything except, so system page type, body content. So in Preside, if you have a particular system page that, for example, is dynamic and it's getting content, filtering content and whatnot, then by default it's not going to cache that because it might not be optimal to do that. And then dynamic content, obviously, based on people who are logged in or nav menu items that appear or disappear depending on region, state, whatever may be the logic. Any dynamic content won't get cached. But as a developer, you can define the content you do not wish to be included in cache. So you can specify which content in a particular request would not be cacheable. So I have a very high-tech drawing here that I'm going to try and use to describe this. So full page cache rendering. So this particular page, I don't know if everyone can see that. This is my highly sought after website. So here I've got somebody's name content, so it's dynamic content for a logged in user. I've got some conditional nav items, and I've got, say, some footer conditional content widget here at the bottom in the footer. So by default, with full page caching enabled, everything on this page will be cached with the exception of any of these items in red. Okay. Now, one of the important things to note is that the nav menu, here's an example of what we can do. So to explain how this page gets rendered, so basically what happens is that the renderer will first of all get all the elements that's required for this request. Anything that's specified as just being cacheable or not being excluded will just get rendered as it should, but anything that's excluded will just we have a little syntax that will output these placeholders for that content on this particular page. Then subsequently anything that's been delayed, as set to be delayed, will then get rendered after that other content, the cache content, is rendered. So the dynamic content gets applied last. Okay, so it means that you can then have full control over what content you wish to include in the cache or which to exclude by simply specifying this parameter here. Okay, so delayed equals whatever it may be. There may be a condition or it may be explicitly excluded. So you can set viewlets, so render viewlet to be non-cacheable using the cacheable false in the viewlet handler. So that means that any viewlets that you're calling in your code for a particular request, they will get omitted from the full page caching. Navigation items as per the previous slide. So you can say if there's any content that's conditional or based on certain logic, you can say, okay, look, delay the rendering of this particular navigation item because it's got some conditional content. Explicit delayed view-lit render. So basically in here you can say render view-lit, same as above, but instead you can explicitly say, I just want to delay this. Don't render this, don't cache this content. And also you've got some request context helpers. So in your actual handlers as well, you can say, you can get you can get whether or not the page is going to be cached. So you can determine whether or not, you can add some conditional logic around that. You can also set then that the page should not be cached in the event. So for a particular page, you can say, look, listen, I know full pages caching is enabled, but for this page, don't apply any caching. And you can also set a page cache out timeout or page cache timeout as well. So I'll be saying cache. I'm asleep tonight, so yeah, or quiche. So you can specify a timeout as well, value in the event as well, in the as a part of this request context helper. And configuring, so again, you can configure your cache store in your Cachebox CFC. So again, the full page caching uses this Preside page cache for its as a cache provider. And say, for example, you have a lot of pages that are being included in this cache, and you need to change the default values that have been set in the Preside Cachebox configuration, then this is where you can do it here in your own application, per application, cachebox.cfc. Okay. So, cache candidates. So what would you cache? So one of the tricks would be to enable debugging output in Lucy, so you can identify potential candidates for caching. So if you can see lots of select data calls, it's a data caching candidate. Okay. If you see lots of render view calls, then you might want to consider using some view caching. If you see lots of calls to an event, then again, look at possibly using the event caching mechanism. And content that would change very rarely, so very static content that would be fixed most of the time. Yeah, throw it in the cache and just let the application read it from there anytime it's rendering a request.
Quick question, Mark.
Yes.
Could you do, if you had the analytics, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling question, I guess, but if you had the Google Analytics plugin, so you could actually see what your popular content is,
yep,
you could trigger an ad hoc task on app startup to almost warn the caches, I guess, with that?
Yeah, that's possible, yeah. So like that conditional content where you can say, look, but back in the navigation view, for example, it determines, is this conditional or not, and it's delayed whether or not that condition's true. So you could add functionality that tests, is this page popular or is this particular item popular? Yes, it is. Delay it, and don't always cache it. Yeah. Oh, the other way around. Sorry, yeah. The other way around. Yeah. Good question. So yeah, viewing cache stats. So obviously, you're adding all these things to your cache, and it's building up, and you're not sure, you'd like a way to inspect this. So in Preside, we have a dev console, which you've seen before earlier today. But in that console, we have a number of commands that allow you to inspect the cache stats and reload them as well. So things to look out for, and I'll give a little demo of that now in a second, but things to look out for would be lots of evictions. So if you've got something that's getting evicted all the time from cache, then you really want to have a look at that. Or there's garbage collections running all the time. If you've got high counts, then definitely worth looking at tweaking your cache settings, or looking at how you're caching, you're using that cache. So you're looking for a healthy performance ratio. So the cache stats give you a performance ratio based on the usage of the cache. So again, I'll show you that in a second. So yeah, in the Preside Dev Console, you've got the ability to reload caches using cache reload command. And as of 10.9, there is a clear cache button as well. So basically in the app, in the admin, you can simply just select clear cache, okay? But importantly, Preside 10.9, it only cleared the Preside page cache, which was the cache provider for full page caching. But as of 10.10, all caches get cleared when you run that. and then viewing the Cashbox debug output in the browser as well is a good way of actually testing, and seeing what's going on in your cache as well. So, so the Cashbox output looks like something like this. You've got like a little diagram. I think right now the graphs won't get displayed because of the UCF chart.
The UCF
path
in most of our Preside apps will be configured.
Yeah, so you may not see the nice charts. Sorry, may look at that, but yeah, you should see all the other statistics here, and so in order to see this output, then you simply can go into your config.cfc and add the callbox.debug mode equals true, and that will then enable the debug output, and you can add this to your URL as well, debug mode equals 1 and debug panel equals cache, and you should get to see this. So demo time. Okay then, so I'll just switch quickly over to
just a quick question about delayed option. Is it how is the replacement done? Is it a string operation, or is that, what does it use? Or string buffer?
Yes.
Or string?
Yeah, string buffer probably. Yeah, it'll take the entire rendered string. Probably there's a string buffer in, and it'll maybe even not. It's then just doing. It finds the pattern repeatedly until the minimum left.
Okay.
Replaces.
Okay, so here you can see some callbox debug output. Okay, and again, it's just because I've set that setting in my config.cfc. And if I go in here and let's just have a quick look. That's fine. Okay, so in here I can say cache stats, and here we output a nice table of stats. So you've got the different cache providers here on the left. Then you've got how many objects are in that cache. So the first number is basically how many are loaded in, and the right hand side is the limitation. So this cache has got, like for Preside object views, it's got up to 200 objects. There's been 3 hits, so there's been 3 requests for something from the cache that have been satisfied, it's there, and there's been 6 misses. The performance ratio right now is 33.33. Not really something to worry about because there's not really a lot going on in that cache. All right, and then you can see like how many garbage collections in the last week. Okay, my eyes are drawn to this one here. Okay, so as you can see here, this one's had a lot of garbage collections, and its hits are higher than its misses, and there's only 74 objects of a 20,000 kind of like available query cache object store. So this is something that I would have a look at. So I would maybe look at what queries are being used, or what using that cache and whatnot, and see if we can get this down to 0. So what I can do is that if I just run a page, for example, on this site. Okay, and then run the same command again. You'll see now that we've now got 2 objects in our object view. Okay, and the numbers are increases. So you can quite easily look at if you're using the data cache, or if you're using the template cache, you can quite easily say, right, okay, cache it, run this, see it getting cached, and add it to the cache, and then removed as well. So some resources, obviously always start off with the Preside docs and stuff, so you can, there's lots of good stuff on there, especially around full page caching. We've got a good little forum going on in the community, preside.org, you can check out as well. Also the Slack channel as well, there's lots going on in there. You can get some help as well. And then the Cashbox, the guys at Ortus, their resources are quite good as well in terms of understanding Cashbox, and a little reference card as well that you can use. And for anybody that's interested in anything outside of the Cashbox and Preside stuff, the standard CFML caching, then this is a good resource as well to have a look at. So Any questions? Thanks for your time. Yes, Seb.
So what generally causes the high number of garbage collections?
Oh, well, yeah, okay. So I know he's like head of the class, isn't he? He just wants to answer all the questions.
Cache providers will have different policies. So some of them will be, if it's a soft reference store, it'll mean that if the JVM is running out of memory, it will go, actually I can grab some of that. And if your cache isn't that important, you might use a soft reference store, so when you run out of memory, and the garbage collection goes, hey, I need some memory, that'll happen. So if you're seeing high
garbage collection,
servers probably running out of memory fairly frequently. I mean, it could have just happened once perhaps, and it just garbage collected a load, but if it's high, then
that's why. So that's that concurrent store and concurrent soft store. So the soft reference means that it will it allows you to collect. When the reap happens, it's basically saying I allow you to take stuff from this cache because this memory's soft referenced. But if it's not, if it's just a concurrent store, then basically it's excluded. It's like, no, you can't touch this. So again, you may actually be running out of memory because everything's configured to that store, and everything. And when it tries to reap something, it can't get anything back from the memory. So. Possibly.
Yeah, it's kind of important to distinguish
between the two.
The cache box reap, which will reap stuff out of it, and the JVM's reaping.
Yeah.
Right? So when the JVM is doing a garbage collection, if it's soft reference, it can take it out of the cache, regardless of what cache box wants to do.
Cool. Any other questions apart from Pixelate? Steve?
Just really quick. I used to back in the day. In my config do a callbox.handler caching equals true and a callbox.event caching equals true.
Yes.
Should I be, and do I still need to be doing this I never quite understood exactly what goes on to do those.
Yeah, so the configuration, the configuration's different. Yeah, so in the config.cfc, is that what you mean? So the settings are enabling the setting just means that it's available, but you need to then specify
so the handler caching setting in Callbox was, if it's false, Callbox every request, if it's hitting a handle for the first time, it loads it in again. That's not true anymore. I think as of Callbox 4, you just don't need to worry about it. It's always cache. It's a separate cache, basically in Callbox. It's not related to kind of cache box, company cache.
Yeah, is that it? Cool. Anyone else want to ask Dom a question? No, it's fine. It's fine.
Would it be possible to use a completely different caching service? I mean, you mentioned that if I wanted to use Redis, for example, would that be easy? Yeah.
So you write your CFC. So basically, let's see if we have any anticipated questions and advanced topics. Cache box event model, I didn't go for that because it's a bit more, but yeah, so cache providers, you can literally write your own, as long as you extend this iCache provider, basically, that interface, then you can utilize whatever it is underneath the hood. So it just, all you're doing is exposing a set of methods for getting a setting and loading the cache, basically, but under the hood, you could be using Redis or DB or anything.
The only thing to say about that is obviously sometimes if you are using it from a performance standpoint rather than a kind of failover standpoint of having cache on a separate server, sometimes the effort of serialization and deserialization where you're putting it across the wire to a separate store, sometimes you gain benefits in terms of scalability across multiple nodes, but you actually reduce performance because it's not as fast as it would be.
Yeah, of course, but it would maybe depend on what cache I'm using it for. So for specific things, Redis would be great, and for others it would be disastrous.
Yeah, but you can certainly, this
I think there is a Redis provider in Torchbox as well.
Yeah, there's a Couchbase one. There's a few. Yeah, there's you can Couchbase server. Yeah, no SQL document store. So again, as long as it complies with this interface, you can implement it. Any other questions? Going once, going twice.
A question about the stats.
Yes.
Garbage collection doesn't mean Java garbage collection, it means cache garbage collection? Or?
No, I think it is the
It is
Java.
yeah.
I'm sure it's the Java one. So the read thing is the cache box process.
How can you figure that out for per cache? It would be for the whole JVM or?
Yeah. I have to look into the code and maybe have a look in, but I know that it does do something where it's detecting memory limits, and maybe it's separate from the JVM garbage collection, but it's doing something outside of the routing. It's going memory is full, and there are memory settings in some of the cache providers.
Yeah.
Right,
So
okay.
It's magic.
Yeah,
It's cache magic. It's just you shouldn't ask. Yeah, yeah. You don't answer. You ask questions like that. Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much.
Super now, but it's back on time.
Good stuff. Yep.
Deeply surprising.
And that wasn't surprising either.
So we're still recording it.